Hi, this is Rupert G from the Hello Deli, and you're currently watching the Letterman podcast. La, 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 la.
Welcome once again to the Letterman podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. I am excited. I'm a broken record talking about how excited I am. I'm shooting a separate intro here. Now, for most of our shows, I like to have the guest on with me when I do the intro. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. Our last episode with Suham being an example of that. But that's the exception to the rule. I like to actually have the guest involved in the intro if possible, because I always start the intro by, what I would like to say, edifying the guest and showing them the love and care that I have for them in their place in the greatest body of broadcasting work in history, which is that of David Letterman and Company. Some would call it pandering. It's not, though. It's literally coming right from my heart, and the emotions, the logic and regard on an intellectual level coming from my brain for these people. And I like them to hear it because I think it starts the energy. It starts letting them know, either if it's research or care that I have for them in their place, and it's cool when they hear it, and sometimes it's fun to just kind of get them feeling a little bit aw shucks before we get going. And again, this is a group of people that are just, oh my gosh, are they ever? Is it ever tough to get them to kind of even admit that they were, did something great? Most of them will never admit they did something great. Some of them will admit that they were a part of something great, which is nice. But you know what? All good. Today is we're doing the intro separate because of I'm truncating it. Now I'm doing the intro beforehand. I'm actually staying pure to what the introduction is. Let's just see how right I am about the things we're going to talk about today. Today, we're talking to Fred Graver. Fred Graver worked at Letterman early on. Again, late night. He's a late night writer, worked there till 1990. This is a dude who, and I'm a broken record in saying this, I am not the first to say this. Many articles have been written about this guy, about just the crazy stuff that he has done throughout his career. Everything from, we're going to talk this, if I have my way, this episode, we're going to talk about, I want to talk a little bit about the Lampoon, the Harvard Lampoon, because he was a part of that with a pseudonym. Very interesting to me. And then he moved over to Late Night with David Letterman, left, became part of Cheers, wrote a choose your own adventure book. And so if you're a Gen Xer like me, a choose your own adventures, are you kidding me? Like, the guy wrote a choose your own adventure book. I want to talk to him about a lot of these things. Went over to, has done a whole pile of things. The Jon Stewart Show, which I love the Jon Stewart Show. And I know many folks who, well, there's not many folks who listen or watch this show yet, but a bunch of people who actually listen and watch this show and listen to and watch this show and are part of the community, like our cult fans of the Jon Stewart Show. I love that Fred worked there. And then also has some crazy adventures within broadcasting to when the infancy of Twitter and Twitter TV and things like that. Now he's working for Microsoft. Just lots of, this guy has a ton of stories and experience. And I'm very, very excited to talk to Fred. Now, he wrote for Dave for years, nearly a decade. And the crazy one, the one where they were really making their bones, and solidifying their place in history, they were mixing the cream and then enjoying the cream, as far as I'm concerned, from 93 on. Don't get me wrong, they worked their butts off after that point as well, but they really made their bones in late night. And Fred was a huge part of that. A lot of the remotes that Dave did. And I mean, he talks about how they are like a choose your own adventure, because you don't know what people are going to say or respond to Dave or that kind of a thing. And it's real time happening. And he has likened that, those two things together. Whether we get to that in this interview or not, I'm not certain, but I do hope, again, many of these first timers who come on the show, what we're doing here is we're creating, we're setting the table. and getting a lot of the background stuff done. So the second, third, subsequent visits, we can talk about the actual bits and some of the memories and things like that as well. So I hope you love what we're doing here. Once again, the Letterman podcast is brought to you by the Hello Deli. I am sufficiently caffeinated now. I've been asked this question actually a few times here in our trip to New York, but then even since from some Letterman folk. They wonder about my energy, and I think Candy talked about it a little bit when she was on a couple episodes ago. I am naturally energetic, but Fred's got a hard out. I'm shooting this intro because he's got a hard in and a hard out. We've literally got 1 hour, and I want to just get to it with him. And so I normally wake up extremely energetic. I look outside; it's a brand new day, and I'm excited. It's just for whatever reason, that is how my wiring was set up. That being said, even though I loathe it, anytime I drink coffee, I'm like a little kid that does I don't enjoy it whatsoever. Every once in a while, when I know I need a superpower, it's kind of like Popeye with spinach to a much lesser, less dramatic degree. I can have some coffee and suddenly my energy just goes like next level. So I have been sufficiently caffeinated with a nitro cold brew here. I'm ready for Freddie, as the Fat Boys said. This is going to be a very cool interview that just delights me in my enthusiasm for David Letterman and company. I hope it does the same thing for you. Without further ado, the Letterman podcast is pleased to present Fred Graver. All right, Fred's here. Fred, this is the first time that we're meeting. I've shot a separate intro.
I want to interrupt and begin right away. I really applaud your courage at ripping the lid off the steaming cesspool that was Late Night with David Letterman. It takes a lot of courage to dig in and find out what the truth was. So let's talk now. Let's get it out, and let's let the healing begin.
Oh, I don't know about courage, but the steaming cesspool, it feels like, okay, talking to writers is one of my favorite things because there are the vocabulary. It's almost like a whole bunch of people, mostly men, but I can't wait. I hope I can talk to Meryl
we can talk about that. We can talk about why that was. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to get into that so much. I mean, I think we all know that the culture has evolved in certain ways and entertainment being one of them. But
you're going to support the patriarchy.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to support it, but well, now I'm in a corner. Now I'm part of the cesspool.
No. Go ahead. I'm sorry. There is a lingo. Yes.
Well, and that's just it. It's like sometimes when I'm talking to one of you that you use almost like it's you guys using David Letterman as a sock puppet, and because I hear his words coming out of you guys, but then of course he brings what he has to it. So, we're going to talk about you with remotes, especially. I can't wait to talk about that.
But there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing going on, right? You gotta, and I'm sure I know that you've covered this, but you have to go right back to here's Dave at the Comedy Store on Sunset, living across the street in what then became the Mondrian Hotel, but was a some kind of SRO at the time with George Miller, and a young woman named Meryl Marco, who got Dave, and weirdly enough, Meryl had no interest in really television. Like she was interested in television, and people can go back and look this up.
She came from an art background, right?
Huh?
She had an art background.
So she was like, oh, Nam June Paik, video, experimenting with video. This is interesting.
Yeah.
And so she saw something in Dave, and it was, and we could talk about this too, like the age of irony, right? And so you, right off the bat, you've got this brilliant writer, conceptual person, Meryl, and you've got this brilliant performer and writer, Dave.
Yep.
And so the first group of people that were hired, well, there's a bunch of people hired for the morning show, and it kind of scrambled. Let's bring Gerard, who knew Meryl. Let's bring them in, right? All that.
Yep.
It was the hiring of people for late night, which somehow, I think through Jim Downey, became a let's bring Harvard boys in here.
Yes.
So there is that ironic Harvard influence, and you got Steve O'Donnell and Joe Toplin and God, I named a ton of people. I'm really bad with names, and I should have written them down before we started.
All good.
Then you have some of them, Tom and Max, right?
Yep.
Things like that. Some of them left right after the first year to go to something called the New Show.
Yeah.
That Lorne Michaels was doing. Thank God for the New Show. I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for Lorne stealing people from the New Show. And my friend Kevin Curran, who was a Harvard boy, Harvard Lampoon boy, and I heard that Dave was hiring.
Yep.
We wrote a packet, and here's I'm getting to your observation here.
Sure.
We went in for an interview, and we were told you'll be lucky to spend 10 minutes with Dave, right? And we walked in with we were originally going to bring. My mother brought me up right, and she said, always bring a gift. So, and it is, by the way, that Midwestern sensibility, I think, that clicked with Dave, right?
Yes.
I was like, I grew up in Chicago. I went to school in Indiana.
Yep.
And so, but originally we were going to bring a salami. And we forgot. And we're walking down 6th Avenue. And this was in the early 80s.
Yep.
And, people would sell stolen shit right on the sidewalk.
Definitely.
And there was a guy selling walkie-talkies. So we bought a pair of walkie-talkies and brought them up. And not knowing that Dave would just immediately go, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
We put batteries in them. We brought batteries. I think we had to go to Radio Shack, and I think we had to give them our address, that's a whole problem. But, so we bought batteries. Dave puts them in, and the first thing we can hear are the taxi cabs on 6th Avenue, whatever frequency they had. And we were there for 45 minutes.
You can't
just
write
hanging
that.
out.
Yep.
Talking about the Midwest. And so your answer is no, there was a sensibility that was really strongly developed by the time I think anybody got to late night, right? Maybe in the morning show they were still figuring it out. But we were hired because we could speak to that.
Yes.
And then I think the kind of unbelievable thing, except for say the writing staff of The Simpsons, that team that stayed, after the New Show exodus, we were there for 8 to 10 years.
Yes.
That's insane in television talk.
Well, especially that show. Especially that show with what you guys are doing. We have a shorthand on the show here where we talk about how you guys, and every once in a while a gal, but you guys, your team, what you guys did was every single day you were in the mine, and sometimes you hit massive gold, huge nuggets, boulders of gold, and then you happily dropped them down on the ground and continued to mine. And some of those gold nuggets or diamonds haven't been really even picked up since then, because there was another show the next night. And the breakneck speed of what you did was just phenomenal. And I mean, we use that word a lot on this show too. It was just phenomenal. It was, I can't believe it.
It's so funny. We were doing this show, and so a lot of that was the organization of just having either Steve or Gerard was the head writer for a little bit, or Merrill was the head writer. We had a board, and the board had 2 weeks worth of cards on it, and we knew those cards needed to be filled. And the way those cards worked, even the pace of coming to work. We came to work. People who were writing monologue jokes got there early, maybe 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and maybe they've already started at home. I know for a while I was writing monologue jokes, and so I would start at home and then come in around 8:30.
Tough to get a joke on the air at that point, because at that point it's opening remarks, and there's three.
Yep. And everybody else showed up around 10. right? And you stayed from like 10 to 7, 10 to 8 if you had something on that you needed to work on. So it was banker's hours, right?
Yeah.
Right. There's those guys upstairs at SNL, on Tuesday and Wednesday night, they didn't go home.
Yeah.
Right. But Dave had this kind of like, look, we have to just keep doing this. We're running a marathon, not a sprint. And so there's that. And then there's the cards, right? There's the board. We know there's like maybe there's a cold opening.
Yeah.
There's opening remarks. There's an act 1 piece. There's a guest. There's an act 5 piece. Maybe there's something at the end. And you got to fix, and originally there's 4 shows a night, right?
Yeah.
So a week, about 4 shows a night, Jesus. And so you just always kept your eye on it, and you knew, I think, I would say everyone on the writing staff, and this is kind of true on writing staffs, period, successful television writing staff, everybody was kind of a self-starter. So they were like, it wasn't tooth and nail competition, but there was competition.
Oh, for sure.
You wanted to make sure that you were earning your keep, right?
Well, were you on the 13-week deal where your thing was every 13 weeks you were
re-upping? And it's funny, after 13 weeks, actually, this is a better story. So after 13 weeks, I went to the executive producer, Barry Sand.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know. Nobody's told me anything. Actually, it was 10 weeks because they needed to give me a 3-week.
Just in case. Yeah.
And I said, well, we're okay. And he's like, never come back here. I'll find you. If it's not working, it won't be on a 10-week cycle, and I will find you.
Okay. That's cool.
But the best story about that is first week, I'm in there and we're writing, and my partner, Kevin Curran, who we'll talk about in a second, and I came in with a stack of stuff. Including the morning show, which was the show that we wrote that got nominated for an Emmy, right? So we came in with a stack of stuff. We were ready. And after the end of the first week, I walked into Meryl's office and I said, gee, am I doing okay? He says, all right. By the way,
how old are you at this point?
A question Kevin would never ask anybody.
Right.
He was like, but I said, hey,
you're early 20s at this point, right?
Yeah. And so Meryl just goes, here's what you're doing fine. Here's what you need to know. I don't know if you've heard this story already. The name of this show is Dave's Attitude Problem. And every night people tune in to go, what the fuck is bugging Dave? What's bothering Dave?
Yeah.
And she goes, you're pretty good. You're pretty good at kind of like what bothers you bothers Dave. So
that's what
you go right ahead. You kind of go, what's bothering Dave?
Yeah.
And so to jump to the remotes, right?
Because you were a big part of the remote, like the remotes. I mean, they got to the point where Dave could not walk the streets anymore.
Right. So that was
because
the problem
of the remotes.
with the remotes. That was the problem with the. But so we'll go back in just 2 seconds. My favorite one about like what's bothering Dave.
Yeah.
There are 2 of them. One, we show up and we had something all written and scripted, and the script was kind of like a decision tree. We'll go into that later. If this happens, say this, right?
This is the choose your own adventure portion, folks, right there.
It is the choose your own adventure. And I had written 2 choose your own adventure books, so we're all good with that.
Delighted me about that. But yes, anyways, please continue.
So Dave couldn't go because he had a toothache. And I was able to find him a dentist. And we went to the dentist. So what's bothering Dave? His tooth is bothering him. He went to the dentist. The 3 jokes that I remember right off the top of my head, by the way, not scripted at all. Dave was just like, let's get the camera and we'll go. And I'm like, okay. So first one, he's got a cigar in his mouth and puts it out in the sink, in the washing spit sink. Second, asks if he can put some rubber gloves on too. I remember that. And then there's Hal's shot. And Hal, people haven't talked about the second funniest person on the staff is Hal. And he said, Dave, let's just get a cutaway. So here's your legs on the lounge on the seat here with the dentist, if you could just raise them up and lower them a couple of times, which is just what everybody does when they're hurting, right? And we just kept cutting back. There's the sound of the drill. So that was great. There was that one, and then there was one where he had a really bad cold.
Yeah.
And we decided to go see an ear, nose, and throat guy.
Yeah.
And I had called a doctor that I knew, a friend of mine, who was a friend of mine at the time, a Dr. Lou Aroni, who, by the way, was on the team.
Dr. Lou. Oh my gosh.
Dr. Lou. So I was the one who introduced Dave to Dr. Lou. My wife and I introduced
the
Dave
amount of medical professionals that are in your circle are astounding, Fred.
So, well, my wife collects medical professionals.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah. No, seriously. So my wife, just for those who don't know, was head of the talent department at Letterman, and constantly got requests. Obviously, you'd get requests from these charities or doctor organizations or hospitals. Oh, could we auction off 2 tickets? Could we auction off 4 tickets? Okay. And Betsy was always kind of like, sure. And your name is Dr. And what do you do again? Okay. And your phone number? Great. Terrific. Yeah, I'm Betsy. If any of my friends ever need a gynecologist, I will, can I call you? So anyway, so Dr. Lou, and so we go and there's an ear, nose, and throat guy who looks like he's walked out of, a production of Our Town.
Yeah.
And he's saying, well, let's just spray this thing up in here to see what's going on.
Yep.
And I've got, by the way, Shecky footage of like little people in a cave, right? And you probably know the phrase Shecky footage, right? So
absolutely.
So then Dave grabs the nozzle and he goes, "Whoo, let me just spray it around here." Unbeknownst to Dave, the solution is like 40% cocaine. It was just weird. And Lou told me like a week later. He said, "Geez, I didn't know how to tell you this." And I don't know if I ever even told Dave, "Oh, you were just spraying cocaine around the room."
Hey, Don Giller, there's a clip. Walter, let's get that clip out. There's something we can isolate. I think the statute of limitations is long behind us.
Maybe it's the 10% solution, but it was a lot. Anyway.
Yeah, no. And the statute of limitation, we're fine. We're okay, Fred.
Yeah. So what do we talk about here? He was not a sock puppet.
No.
We were hired for various reasons. I did a lot of remotes.
Yeah.
So Meryl really invented the remote form, right? She invented, she did probably the best one of all, Just Bulbs, right?
Absolutely. We were just in New York a week ago, and on our way out to go to LaGuardia, we passed Just Shades. You were
on 59th Street.
Seeing that, it was such an omen on the way out of New York after spending a week there. Oh, so beautiful. Those places are still around, by the way.
Yeah. So I went on a bunch of them with her, and it worked for me because I did have a background in journalism. So for me, there was no problem going somewhere, spending a day walking around trying to find out where the jokes were. Back in the day, you would take Polaroid pictures and tape them to cards and say, "Oh, here's a joke, here's a joke, here's a joke. We could do this. If they say this, you could say that." Dave would approve it. The amazing thing for me, we'd go out in a van. It was Dave and Carl, the cameraman.
Yep.
George Magda was doing sound, and Hal was directing. Literally, just a small group of us. We'd go out, we'd do it. Dave would read the sheet, 2-3 pages, leave them in the van, remembered every line, but of course was great on his own, amazing on his own. And the fun part was you go back the next week and you get 3 days in the edit room to make something.
Yes.
Right. So that kind of takes you out of the firing line. You don't need to worry about any little cards. You're good to go.
Were there ever any that you went out and shot and it's like, oh, here's a surefire card. This is something that really, really delights me. I've seen footage of and I've seen remotes that actually didn't make the show. Were there ever any that you could think of that were like, yes, there was that Polaroid, the conception was there. We actually shot some stuff, but it didn't get realized to the point where it made one of the cards? Was there ever any of that, or did most of your remotes get on the air?
It would happen from time to time. I remember one time, this is really embarrassing. Dave was doing a thing, and again, I think Dave made this one up, and I don't have. So imagine the days with the flip wallet, right? So Dave, and this is important, and you brought this up. Up until I would say the 4th year of the show, we could go out in the street and nobody knew.
Yeah, he was unassuming still,
right? And it was great. Like you could go out, and once in a while, like we'd walk into a pizza place and they'd recognize it, right? Sure. But it was fun. Like it wasn't like. And then there was a time we went out, and we were literally near I know this is going to sound really cliched. We were near a construction site, and the guys started yelling obscenities at Dave and being like whatever. And Dave got in the van, and that was kind of it. It was kind of I can't because I can't go to a location and they don't know who I am.
Yep.
Right. So that was a problem. And so the one, I mean, there's a few that I'm embarrassed about. One, we were doing Mr. Curious. So Dave would walk up to people on the sidewalk. They didn't know Dave.
Yep.
And he would say, "What's in your bag?" Yep. He'd be carrying a bag or something, right? And he goes, "Well, I can look in it." And he'd flip his wallet. He goes, "Because I'm Mr. Curious," as if he was showing a badge or something. And people would show him, and then Dave would just riff on what was in their bag. And one time I suggested a location, not realizing that it was about a block away from the outpatient entrance to a hospital. And everybody who walked by us was ill. And Dave just at one point was just like, "What the hell?" Like, really? And we just hightailed it out of there. Yeah. There was another one where I thought it would be fun to just go visit Pete Fatovich at home. And Pete, it just didn't work. Yeah. I didn't write it well enough. I didn't go ahead and outline it. It was my fault. Completely my fault. And we drove away, and everybody knew there's nothing there.
Okay, can I ask you a question about that? Now, I assume that this is not early in the run.
No, now we're like 5-6 years in. Yeah.
Okay, so at that point, because I hear this sometimes, it's where a writer might say, okay, like what you just said, I didn't write it enough, I didn't conceive it enough, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, but I could always fall back on the idea where Dave could just be Dave and could literally, sew gold out of straw.
It didn't work because we love Pete.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
And it just felt uncomfortable to the point. And then the one thing that we thought, I can't believe I remember all of these things. It's weird. I think, again, just as an overriding thing, for those of us who were there, particularly those of us who were there at the early days of our career, where we were making up who we were as much as we were making up who the show was. I just remember tons of stuff. And I remember Pete had a neighbor who kept bees. And so Dave did the whole beekeeper thing, and the guy, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
There's nothing funny about it. And to Dave's credit, I don't know if he'd even remember this, but I do. To Dave's credit, he had his own car. He had driven from home to Pete's house instead of from the office. But he had to go back to the office, and he invited me to ride home with him, and was great about like, "Look, I know that just bombed. Do not worry. Like, let's talk about something else." And he could tell, because he could tell I was just like crushed. I just thought, oh my God,
yeah,
this is horrifying. I've dragged everybody out here. Yeah. I had no idea. Yeah.
That's really cool, because I mean, so often we hear stemming from Carter's books, and also stories, anecdotes, about postmortems and things like that about after the show. But the idea, like what you guys did, was not easy. And to hear, the encouragement, we would hear also stories about how Dave and Meryl shielded many of the writers from the NBC executives or any of that stuff that was going on behind the scenes. So we do hear this, but the idea that you actually had that personally, where Dave was encouraging and all of that, that's a narrative that just doesn't get thrown out enough because of the other reality that you guys also dealt with, the pressures of that breakneck speed. I love that. Do you remember what kind of a car it was?
That's a good one. I think it's a Pontiac GTO, something like that.
Yeah.
It was like in that family.
Yeah. The American Muscle.
We did a secret video. So during there's that big long writer's strike.
Yep.
That went on forever. I forget, like in the third it's like the third year of the show.
Yeah.
Fourth. And
the mid-'80s writer's strike.
During that time, Dave turned 40.
Yeah.
So Betsy and I and Hal and Lori Guthrie and Kevin Kay, Jude Brennan, Barbara Gaines, started. The original idea was just to tape random people on the street saying happy birthday to Dave, and we cut it together and send it to him. Somebody gets it in their head, oh, why don't we have some of Dave's friends in it? So now we've got shots of a telephone with a microphone hooked up to it and Steve Martin calling and saying hi to Dave. And then we start combing through NBC, and there's Tom Brokaw and the NBC personalities. Sure. Then it branches out into, we could go to get the Yankees. And so Betsy goes to Yankee Stadium with Lori Guthrie and gets Billy Martin and George Steinbrenner. At the same exact time, I'm getting Richard Nixon.
Holy crap.
So we had Nixon, Mayor Koch, Jane Pauley, all these people. And
it's like you're gophers and you've been digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging for so long in your little hole, and then you pop your head up and realize, we've done a whole field here.
We didn't realize, holy shit.
The impact.
Right? And so send the tape. Yeah, we just sent the tape to Dave on his birthday. He gets it. He's home in California.
Holy crap.
Like a day later, I just get a phone call, and I pick up the phone. This was the days before caller ID, right? And, hello, and he goes, Nixon. How the fuck did you get Nixon? And here's the story. This is even better. So Nixon was in a recording studio in New York City, recording some voiceover for something.
He just happened to be in a place with recording devices, which, by the way, not a good thing for Richard
Frank
Nixon.
Gannon was a segment producer on the show.
Okay.
Frank
I got
had worked in the Nixon White House.
I gotcha.
So that's how we got to Nixon. So we're all getting into an elevator after everything's all done, and everybody's kind of crowding in, and Nixon's there, and the door starts to close.
Yeah.
And I got to the door a little too late, and it literally slammed Nixon up against the wall of the elevator. Not too hard, but like an elevator, and then it bounced back.
Hard enough.
And Frank forever was like, you fucking let the door slam on Nixon. You could have reached your arm in. And I said, I just didn't. I blame my subconscious for that. I blame my unconscious self for letting the door slam. But yeah, I don't know how we got into that. That's something that will never see the light of day. It will never see the light of day. There's a couple of things that I did on remotes that A, will never see the light of day, and B, I'll never tell you about.
Okay, well, and fair enough. And I've
had
a
really
few of
fun.
those.
They were very. Yeah. It got very personal.
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah.
Or hilarious, but not fit for broadcast. I've heard a lot of these tales, and crazily enough, there are a lot of them that are recorded, and there are sitting there somewhere on a tape. But yes, the stuff that hits the cutting room floor many times is compelling. I appreciate you going down that road a little bit. Fred, I mean, you and I can have a conversation. I want to talk to you. Like, there are so many things I want to talk to you about. Like, I want to talk to you about what do you think about Elon Musk with Twitter? I want to talk to you about things outside of the show. You're really compelling when it comes to this stuff, but there's so much Letterman stuff. We just had Dave Rogalski on the show, and he talked a lot about, again, the show is positive. We celebrate what we call the greatest body of work in history of broadcasting work. Getting to 1990 when you left, and he talked about the pressure and all of the things that started to be rolling. By that point there, the Carson wheels were in motion, things like that. Were you feeling the pressure at the time when you left, or did you just know? Because again, out of all the writers who worked for Letterman and Company, you have the greatest kind of plethora of different jobs within the industry as well. Did you know it was time to stop being a writer and to move into other elements of broadcasting, or was the pressure there where you needed to get out?
There wasn't a pressure to get out.
Okay.
Dave really, really appreciated people who were still there.
Yeah.
And what there was about the sixth or seventh year, right? We went to LA.
Yeah.
And we did a week of shows in LA.
Yeah.
And we had no idea up until then how popular the show was. Again,
that gopher thing. Yeah.
And suddenly we're driving into the parking lot at NBC and we're using Johnny Carson's studios. And it's 8:30 in the morning and there's lines down the block to get into our show. And people are like, what?
To get into your show, not Johnny's show, your show.
So there was that.
Yep.
There was then agents start to circle and start to tell you about the opportunities that are out there.
Yes.
And they were good opportunities.
Absolutely.
And that coincided, I think, with there's just a day you show up and you drop, you keep using the gopher metaphor. I used to use the metaphor just like the bucket in the well. And you drop the bucket in and it just went clunk. And you realized, it really, you're there for it. And this happens over days. The agent thing happened over years where suddenly people are like, oh, wait, I think the first migration was The Simpsons, right?
Yep.
And I know my friend Kevin, right? He was like, I'm going to go work on this. Actually, he went to work on Married with Children, but it was that Fox explosion. But I've talked to Jeff Martin and I'm like, really, Jeff, it's a cartoon. How long is that going to last? How long is that going to last, Jeff? I mean, and there's guys there, Tom
Shout out to Jim Brooks, by the way.
Huh?
Shout out to James Brooks.
Shout out to Jim Brooks. Shout out to Sam Simon.
And Sam, yeah. Look at those guys.
So there was all that stuff kind of came together. And then for me, I met Norman Lear through his daughter, Kate, and he was thinking, oh, I want to go back into television. He had a couple of ideas, literally for late night television, and offered me a deal, like come to LA, spend a couple of years with me.
Yeah,
it's like fucking Norman Lear.
well, we talked to Steve Weiner, when he, went to work for Robert Klein. Like, I mean, legend. Right. At that time, Norman Lear was a legend. Never mind now. Like, at that time, he's a legend.
He was a legend. Yeah.
So I get it.
I also think, to a degree, and I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing. Right now, I'll let you know when I'm guessing about it.
Okay.
I think Worldwide Pants was partly a response to Worldwide Pants, the Ray Romano thing. All of that was a response to, Jesus, I'm losing my writers. Right.
Oh, wow.
I think so, to a degree. Yeah. Right. I think
that's a great perspective.
Wait, why are all these guys? And I'm guessing, but it has to have occurred to him. Why are all these people leaving?
Yeah.
To go work for, and I could do this myself. Right? I can go in and pitch a show and say that we'll produce it. Right? And so that's what I think.
Hindsight being 2020 on this show, we talk about this. We talk about how the dream. It's so funny how many times growing up, our dreams are short-sighted. Dave's dream was getting the Tonight Show, and it was an obsession dream, but with the benefit of hindsight, looking back, the best thing that ever could have happened to David Letterman was him going to CBS, because he walked right into the Carson deal. The Carson deal included ownership and included production opportunities. And you look at, some of the things that went really, really well, Ray Romano, some of the things that went moderately well, like Ed, and some of the things that didn't go as well. But at the end of the day, you had a lot more paint on the tray to see what you could make on the easel. And I think you're totally, totally bang on. And we've never heard it that way, though. The idea that, right now, I'm trying to pitch Pants ideas as to, a Worldwide Pants podcast network. Me and a few others are pitching this idea because there's so many of you guys out there. I think of Steve Young. I think of some of these other people who have these projects. Wouldn't it be great if there was an outlet for these amazing creatives who just want to throw something out there? Bathtubs Over Broadway with Steve Young is the one that comes to my head right now. But the idea that Dave could do that for these folks that were leaving at the time, the idea that it was plugging a hole in the bottom of the rowboat is compelling. It's never been said on this, Fred. Thank you for that perspective.
I've just thought, right?
Yeah.
Makes
it's a great one.
Sense. Yeah. And so, and then the other thing that's interesting about just careers in general. Well, first thing, you meant careers in general, but you're right. The switch to CBS for Dave, meant, and it's interesting to me how the beginning of those years, everybody was like, it's Dave versus Jay.
Yeah.
I feel like, as somebody who was still watching the show, about 2 or 3 years into it, I think Dave said, fuck it. I do my own thing. I'm wondering if, Les Moonves said to him, somebody said,
don't worry about it.
It doesn't matter.
Yep.
You have a completely different audience.
Yep.
Go ahead and do what you do. It's a distinct offering, right? Yep. As they say in network television, it's a distinct product.
Yep. Yep.
And you watched him, and those are the years when, he became such a good interviewer.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the unsung, if you kind of look at, like, you're talking to me about those early years of Dave,
yep.
At late night,
yep.
the early comic innovation years. Yep. And you end on the Late Show with the years of being really the best interviewer on television, bar none,
without a doubt,
because he was such a good listener.
Yeah. He's naturally curious, which is why my next guest is so good, because he'll go sit down with Billie Eilish. And many of his audience are like, why the hell are you interviewing Billie Eilish? No, he's genuinely curious as to what has made her the phenomenon that she is. And that curiosity then translates to even hardened people who didn't think they would care. But by the end of the Tom Snyder-like long form hour, they're invested.
Yeah, and watch him with Lizzo.
Yeah.
I mean, him with Lizzo, to me, is the best of his entire series.
Yes.
Right. Including so he's great with her. She clearly loves him. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that he's able to show a clip of her from 5 years ago.
Magic.
Amazing.
Again, there was that ownership thing right there. He owned that.
My favorite part is she asks him to get in front of the microphone, and he does classic 80s Dave.
Yeah.
Singing about how he hates himself.
I'm ugly. I'm this. I'm that.
And I was just like, you're in this. Lizzo is this fountain of positivity, and you've decided to sing about how you're disgusted with yourself.
I love that she was strong enough and not intimidated to call him on it. And that's one of the things that I love, that these people that he interviews are all very much know who their identities are, and they can call him on stuff. Like Seinfeld, when Seinfeld interviewed him, there are many times where Seinfeld would say, I think you're full of crap on this or whatever. Yeah. And those are really compelling to me, because I think Dave, I don't know this for a fact, but I think he craves that. I think he wants somebody on the other side of the chair.
He wants a real conversation. He absolutely wants a real conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that's the, right. So, that's the link between the two poles here is you're always looking for a moment that breaks through the canned nature of broadcasting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You're
I could
always
not agree
looking,
more.
Could this, and now you go back to actually Merrill. So Merrill and I bonded on who's William Wegman with the famous dog pictures. Very early on in the 70s, experimented with video. And some of his video experiments, I saw them at the Museum of at the Art Institute in Chicago at a display. And there are things like, you have to realize it's like, so this is very early video, like home video. So it's black and white, it's grainy. Here's the camera, and the camera is tight on, like, all you're seeing is this. It's William Wegman's naked torso.
Yep.
And he's got a can of deodorant, and he's spraying the deodorant onto his armpit and talking about how much he likes this deodorant until the can runs out. So the stuff is running down his torso and falling up, and it's looking disgusting.
Yep.
And he's just talking in this, this is so great. It gives me, and it uses all the cliches, 24-hour coverage, right? So he had that, and then he did a really interesting thing with one of his dogs. He put a dog biscuit in a glass jar. And the audience, again, people like in a museum just watching on little benches, horrified. Oh my God, because the dog's going to break the jar. The dog's going to, and it was that, right? And she and I talked a lot about that, about just how hard it was to create something on television that didn't feel like it was prepared.
Yeah.
That something real could happen. Yeah.
Well, I think you guys did a really good job. We talk about this on the show a lot, actually, about how you guys broke the fourth wall. I think that's one of the reasons why there's a hunger for this right now. Folks like me who felt like we were a part of the show because you did break the fourth wall, and the cast and crew were not like Johnny, the show business, everything show business. No. The cast and crew were regular folk just like us. The viewer mail segments, which again, incredible mine of unlimited comedy that could come from that. We were all a part of it. And I think that part of, you've just touched on, one of the things that made us feel a part of it was you took the everyday life and things, the cute things my dog does, that if there was an audience who would watch it, they would universally applaud or be horrified or have an emotional response to it. You guys made that a centerpiece as part of the show, but had a world-class broadcaster helping to helm it. So was taking it seriously in that regard.
So it wasn't like you guys are just goofing off.
No.
This isn't so. Yeah, because there was a lot of again, right? This could go wrong.
Yeah,
stupid pet tricks. It can go wrong, right? And a lot of it, there was one. I want to talk for a second about my friend Kevin Curran.
Please.
So Kevin, I met Kevin when we were both at the National Lampoon.
Yeah,
and we hit it off immediately. Kevin was just brilliant and unique and weird. And the great majority of writing teams have two people, one of whom is the workhorse and one of whom is the show pony. And I was the workhorse. I was the guy getting in at 10 in the morning. I'm going to type this out.
Yeah.
And Kevin would walk in, and this is what the show pony does, and just go, no, it's this.
Oh, wow.
And you go, fuck. So here's my favorite story about that. And it goes back to, hey, this might go wrong, but it's going to be genuine. Yeah. So there was a viewer mail question. And there was an era in viewer mail where it stopped being, how can I get tickets to the show? And got it into like, oh, I'm going to write a viewer mail that gets on the air.
Yeah.
And it was, and if I remember correctly, it was, what do Burt Reynolds, Sally Fields, and I can't remember what the third person was, but it was somebody like, and I'm carbon dating this joke, Morgan Fairchild. What do Burt Reynolds, Morgan Fairchild, and Sally Field have in common? That was the viewer mail. And so I'm in there trying to come up with different alternatives. And Kevin goes, well, they all get their nutrition from a salt lick. So we hand it in, and Dave approves it. And they do a card with the 3 faces, and then you pull a plastic little overlay, and these cartoon tongues come out, and there's a salt lick. and so Dave does it, and there's just a stunned silence.
Awesome.
In the audience. They really don't know why this has been done. And Dave starts just cackling. And Paul's laughing. And this is so surreal. And then he just moves on to the next, and he's just like, okay, and we'll just move on to the next thing. And to me, that was Kevin. Just Kevin was capable of that in ways that were just amazing. And B, that was part of the thing. It's like, oh, let's, you have the Randy Cohen things with the 360-degree show or Monkey Cam. And it's like, this is a recipe for this just going wrong. That's why we're going to do it.
It's so great. And it's funny. I said this to O'Donnell. I asked O'Donnell this at the beginning during one of our parts with him. It was like, as a writer, would you rather have a wide open field where you can do anything, or like a shoot that you would have to go through, with some parameters? And it's like, okay, how can we then take these parameters and be as clever as possible, almost like it was an open field, but the shoot is actually really important.
I'm going to guess Steve opted for the shoot. Yeah.
I think it was safe to say that, even though I think it led into the fact that you guys didn't feel constrained by the rules of the Tonight Show and all that stuff was Dave and Merrill kind of shielded you guys from that, but there was those constraints that you had. But I mean, once viewer mail was viewer mail, you guys knew you could kind of do almost anything with that, because there was nothing like that on TV at that point.
Yeah. You said a couple of things. Yes, I'll just agree. You said a couple of things, and then I was just like, oh wait, and then I completely forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, well, next time. Now, here's another thing here. We have, I've already alerted the viewers through the intro that we have a heart out here and all of that. I'm going to tell you one of the things that I would love, an aspiration that I have for this show, is that we actually take a show and dedicate it to the Lampoon. And the Harvard connection. Throughout all of me as a Gen X viewer who never got involved in the industry, we've always heard the jokes about Harvard and Harvard writers and this. Like, if you're a Simpsons fan, if you're a Simpsons aficionado, you've heard these jokes all the way along. Krusty the Clown throwing books at Harvard writers and hitting them in the head, that kind of thing. I'm fascinated. I would love to have some of the alum on here, maybe a few of you at the same time, and talk.
I'm not an alum. I have coasted for years on people thinking that I went to Harvard. So it worked for me with Dave because I went to Notre Dame.
Okay. So where's the Lampoon? Because you wrote for them as a pseudonym.
No, I wrote for the National Lampoon.
Oh, you wrote for the National Lampoon. Okay. Yeah. And that's part of the misconception.
So for years, when it worked to my advantage to have people assume I went to Harvard, I just kept my fucking mouth shut. When it worked to my advantage to go, those fucking Harvard boys, I would play that card. It worked great for me.
You wrote for the National Lampoon under a pseudonym, right?
No, I know I wrote it in my own name, but this is a good. I'll tell this story as quickly as I can because it's a good story. Obviously, the two founders of the National Lampoon, were Doug Kenny and Henry Beard.
Okay,
and both of them were Harvard boys.
Yep.
And Doug was. I met Doug once, but Doug was a fucking our sense of humor. If you can track from Animal House through Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
that is mine. That is all a direct connection to Doug Kenny and the National Lampoon.
And to many Gen Xers, a religious journey right there. What you just said.
There you go. So there's Doug. There's Doug.
Yeah.
Doug goes to Hollywood.
Yeah.
Makes Caddyshack, and then falls to his death tragically in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Kevin, by the way, lived with Doug for a summer. So there you go. So after Doug, A guy named P.J. O'Rourke took over the National Lampoon, conservative humorist, P.J. O'Rourke. And then after that, there was a guy named Jerry Sussman, who basically was kind of just keeping the magazine running.
Okay.
Jerry hired me as a copy editor because I could copy edit. I knew how to copy edit. I had come up in newspapers. I knew how to do that, but I also knew how to copy edit in a way that wouldn't kill the joke. Right. So if it's misspelled or there's stuff missing or whatever, I know, oh, that's a joke. That's why it's, and I'm not like somebody going like, anyway. So
economy of words,
pitching ideas, and I get a bunch of stuff on. Jerry leaves the Lampoon, and Sean Kelly, who was one of the original National Lampoon people, and I are in a room one day. That room is probably a bar, and we decide to create a fictional editor-in-chief that is an amalgam of all the past editor-in-chiefs.
Oh, that's genius.
And we called him L. Dennis Plunkett. And L. Dennis's editorials at the beginning of every issue were always Webster defines satire as, they were just horribly pretentious and terrible. And then it would begin to reveal how he worried about, this was a Henry Beard reference, how his family never forgave Roosevelt for how he got us out of the Depression, because Mama lost all of her, Pa lost all of his, fortune. Right?
What a beautiful device.
And then when mail came in to L. Dennis, I would answer it. And so somebody wrote in one time and said that I also had to answer the slush pile. And if there was somebody who was kind of close and like we really actually wanted to reply to, I would reply to them. And then they'd write again, and I go, it didn't work out this time. Thank you so much. And somebody decided that they were unhappy with the way they'd been treated by me, and they wrote to L. Dennis. L. Dennis wrote back to him and said, thank you so much for helping me get the goods on this Graver guy. I have been trying. If you could just Xerox the correspondence, I will get on this right away. Then the guy Xeroxed the correspondence and sent it in. And then I just got a pang of conscience and just dropped it. I thought, this is cruel. This poor guy, he thinks he's got it in at the Lampoon now. And I said, I just sent him a kind of like, thank you very much. This is under investigation or something like that. But I felt bad. I felt like, oh, geez. So it probably, Morning Fred felt bad about what.
There it is.
Done. And so, so that was that.
Oh, that's an awesome story. What an awesome device that is, though. The idea that you could then be representing what a beautiful ping pong of comedy that you have there for yourself. That's awesome.
But the thing I learned at the National Lampoon, the writers' meetings there were vicious, and people would just say, that sucks. You'd pitch something and somebody'd go like, that's stupid. And you just go like, okay, I got another one.
Yeah.
Like walk in with 10 ideas, walk in with 15 ideas and hope maybe one survives, which was exactly what happened what it was like at Letterman.
Well, it's the classic, is this anything, right? And we can choose to respond to, is this anything, with kindness or just no emotion whatsoever. I asked Tommy Ruprecht, who came along after he was in Late Show, great moments in presidential speeches. That was all him.
Yeah.
And I asked Tommy about that. Was there ever things that you wish would have gone on? And he goes, you know what? The things that I can think of were in the first couple months, because in the first couple months, that's when you have these ideas and you're attached to them. After a couple months, you don't get attached to anything, because it's 1 in 10, 1 in 20, whatever it is, that even get any attention whatsoever. And that's the life of a comedy writer.
The other thing that's interesting is that Dave always remembered pitches, even if they'd been rejected.
Oh, that's interesting.
So for the first couple of years I was there, I suggested, hey, why doesn't Dave rent a convertible and drive through a car wash?
Holy crap.
And so Dave turned it down. And then after the writer's strike, I remember he mentioned it to Steve, like, maybe we should do that now.
Yeah.
And I was shocked that he had like remembered it. There is a fatal flaw in that remote. So here's the fatal flaw. We go to Avis. We rent a car. Dave drives the car to Queens. We go to a car wash. Dave stays inside the car with Carl, the cameraman, and goes through the car wash.
Yep.
Completely mic'd up and everything.
Yep.
Drives back to return the car. The car, by the way, there's 2 inches of water inside of the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fatal flaw is that Dave is wearing dry clothes when he returns the car. And the reason that is that whatever fucking chemicals exist in car wash water were horribly uncomfortable for Dave. And he was just like, I got to get out of these clothes. I can't wear these. And we all rode back, and I tried. I said, come on, put them back on. No, it wasn't going to happen. I think he did develop a slight rash, like over the weekend. I felt terrible. And the person I really felt terrible for was Carl. Carl was covered in plastic tarp with the camera, having to ride through the car wash.
And years later, pitched. Okay, that I don't know that we've ever heard that, because I mean, people remember that remote. I don't know that. Yeah,
you could never. You can't. I tried every once in a while to repitch something, and either Steve or Dave would catch it and just go, "We've heard that before."
We've heard that before. Oh.
Unless you have a new reason, right? Oh, wait, now that blank has happened. Yeah. So we've got, unfortunately, I apologize. I have a day job.
Yeah, no.
Which is
you're working for you're a tech guy too. Like that's
it's
what
really
you developed into.
So I'll tell you in 1 minute what I do, because it's weird for an old comedy writer to be doing this. I work with people at Nuance and Microsoft who work on conversational artificial intelligence, and I help write what the machine says to humans and how the machine will understand what humans say. And this is a market this is a job that didn't exist 3 years ago.
Yep.
But then as AI got smarter and smarter, they said, well, maybe we need people who actually know how humans talk.
Can you make them funny, Fred?
I have tried. I've been working. I do some work for the New York City 311 system, understanding that. And I keep pitching, can we just have the system from time to time just go, forget about it?
Yes, you go.
Or if somebody uses obscenities, right, what people do, they call, they go, fuck you, put an operator on. Just go like, do you kiss your mother with that mouth?
Oh, see.
Right. And I keep pitching that, but they won't. No, it won't happen.
I love this. I appreciate this so much. Do you think your wife would do the show?
Oh, geez. I don't know.
Okay.
That's a big if. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, if you could put a good word in for me,
I will.
That would be amazing. I think that she would have a tremendous perspective.
I don't think she will. I think the only way she might go on is if it was like her and Barbara Gaines together.
Well, I would love that. We're trying to figure out a way to get Barbara on the show. She didn't give me a flat out no when I saw her last week in New York. She gave one of my best buds is one of my favorite people in the world is a guy by the name of Scott Ryan. He wrote this book. Barbara Gaines is featured a lot in this book, and I referenced that to her. I said, Scott got you, and she goes, yeah, but it took a lot of work. And hey, I'm willing to put in a lot of work.
No, it's hard. I think in general, and good for you for tracking this, trying to do, I think people in general are very protective of Dave.
Yep.
And of all of us.
Yep.
And regardless of the joke that I started with, it was not a hellhole.
No.
I've worked in really bad fucking shows and bad
It was
jobs.
a family, Fred, a generational family, by the way.
It was weird. It was weird that, and there were people who were like mad at each other, and some people,
like any family. Absolutely.
Like any family. But again, because of who we were and what point in our careers, we were making ourselves up as much as we were making the show up.
Well, I certainly in this show, and we've made no bones about it right from the very beginning. We talk about how we don't deal in scandal or gossip. Obviously, if there was something with a guest on the show or something like that, that's fair game. But we don't talk about the parts of family that you wouldn't talk about. And that's me, earnestly wanting to protect exactly what you're talking about. And with the assurances, I mean, we're 30-something episodes into this thing, and I think that the word's getting out a little bit about how our show wants to protect exactly what you're talking about here, because again, I'm pissed off that the world has forgotten who Johnny Carson is, and that's not going to happen to you guys if I have anything to say about it.
Yeah. Hey, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
When you watch Bill Maher,
yes, sir,
hasn't he like taken 90% of his gestures and mannerisms and timing from Carson?
That is so crazy that you have said that. I was talking to somebody the other day about that.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
No, it's not.
But I watch him and I go, it's
yep.
Shrug.
Yep.
This, yep. He does that. Yeah. It's the whole.
I'm going to ask Mark Malkoff about that, who hosted the Carson podcast. He's been on this show, and I'm going to ask him about that because I forget who I was talking to. He just had Leno on not too long ago. And so I was really interested. He's got a podcast now. And so one of us made that exact observation that it's almost like he's trying to channel Carson in his mannerisms. That's crazy that you just said that. Yes.
I think a lot of it is it's just who he grew up on. I don't think it's like a bad thing. I just think it's who he is. In the same way that if I get up in front of a group of people and start talking, Betsy, my wife, points this out all the time. I start doing Dave's hand gestures. I start picking up using his rhythms. And it's just because for years I was just laser focused on this guy.
Yep. For me, it's vocabulary. I have a ton of the words that I say came from words that he would say, like, oh my Lord, or just different little things.
Here's George Miller's joke.
This is a great way to finish right here.
What's Letterman's, and he did it on stage, so I'm not fucking with it. What's David Letterman's idea of foreplay? Let's get on with it, shall we?
We're finishing. Fred, come back on the show. I can't wait for this. Okay. You and I will communicate offline later on. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for everything that you have done.
Thank you.
We appreciate you, and we will talk to you again very soon, hopefully. Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye. Cheers. Okay, you know what? He just exited, and I'm just going to keep going and finish with the outro here. I love when I have a hard time keeping up with the guest. By the way, I stepped on him a couple times. There's a couple times with Zoom. I'm starting to get good at it, but sometimes I'm still fatally flawed, as Fred just said. I'm fatally flawed with over talking with somebody. So I apologize to the audience about that in real time right now. We'll just keep going in one cut. You're about to see my reaction now. Every single time I finish with a guest, every time, it has happened every single time I've had one of these former staffers on the show, and instead of hitting stop, which I normally do, and then go and have this feeling of, wow, what a cool conversation that was. You're seeing it in real time right now as this show evolves. Fred Graver, phenomenal. Again, I use that word all the time because it's how I feel. There's no better word. I'll consult a thesaurus. I will consult a thesaurus. There we go. I'm going to blame the coffee on that one. And try and find other synonyms to phenomenal that I can insert into the vocabulary. But yeah, I just am really grateful. What Fred talked about, we've talked about it on the show. He doesn't necessarily know that how many of these people are so protective of things. And as we move forward as a show, as our community grows, that's going to be a standard that we have. And I mean, people make jokes and things like that. We're going to have the standard of being as protective as we can about the personal things, about the family things, that stayed family. And that's great. That's what we need to do, because then it allows us, to talk with some freedom about all the other stuff. And why are we all here? We're not here for the behind the scenes family stuff that people don't necessarily like to talk about. We're here for all the other stuff. We're here because of the commonality. I referenced the conversation that I had with Barbara Gaines in New York. And I mean, I'm not telling, Candy says I need to stop saying telling tales out of school. I don't think I'm breaking any confidences when I say this. One of the things that Barbara said is she just kind of looked at me, and it was just as she was about to walk away down 53rd Street. And she said, you know what, we're just all crazy. And it was in reference to the staff and the family that Fred and I were just talking about. And I don't know if crazy is the exact right word. I think sometimes it certainly is, because they all had this askew sense of humor. And I think that many of us feel that same way. I know I certainly do. And I'm just very appreciative of this family. And Fred had so many things. Like, he worked on Cheers, he worked on all of these things, he worked on Twitter when Twitter was getting into TV. Now he's working in, you see what he's working in right now, the places that he has gone since. The idea that Dave and company created Worldwide Pants for the idea that maybe the exodus would be a little bit different. It could be what do we do now within the family. I love that idea. That's something that we're going to explore on the show. Fred Graver was just a phenomenal guest. Sorry, there's phenomenal again. I appreciate every single person that has watched or listened to this show thus far. Thank you very much for giving us a chance. For the ones who are globbing on to the show, fantastic. Let's build a community. Join the Facebook group. For those who have come on the show and who are about to come on the show, we've got a couple of really cool interviews. I've got another one tonight, another writer. I'm so grateful. I'm having so much fun doing this, and I am excited for the fact that these conversations are actually touching other people too, whether it's in the dozens or right now we're in the hundreds with all the platforms, over 1,000 every episode. And that's gratifying to hear that other people are enjoying this as well. Please feel free to send feedback, join the Facebook group. Let's make this a community. If you have ideas that are smarter than me, chances are you do, because I ain't the sharpest tool in the drawer. Please send them in, and we will start incorporating them. This has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Our guest today was Fred Graver. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, and good night. It's the awkward moment when I say thank you and good night, and I hit stop. That moment in between there's an awkwardness. Let's just live in that moment for a second, shall we? So awkward.
Overcoat and underpants.